"Please save me, and I will have your child," said the Comanche girl to the old rancher. The wind whipped across the high plains, carrying with it the dry smell of dust and the faint iron tang of blood. Jason Holloway sat tall in the saddle, his weathered hands resting loose on the reins. At 62, the old rancher carried the look of a man who had seen too much, his shoulders still broad, but bent by years of grief and solitude. The faint white scar across his jaw caught the sunlight, a reminder of a knife fight long before most men in Dry Creek had ever grown beards. He had ridden out only to mend fence posts along the northern line of his ranch. Instead, he found her, a young Comanche girl, no older than 20, burst out from the scrub brush. Her dark hair flew wild in the wind, her eyes wide and fevered. Blood stained the hem of her buckskin dress, and the way she stumbled told him she'd been running for hours. Jason swung his horse around, and instinctively dropping to the worn grip of his colt. He expected warriors behind her, maybe a hunting party, maybe worse. But there was no one, only her, panting, desperate, her voice breaking as she cried out, "Please, save me," she gasped, falling to her knees in the dust. Her words were halting but clear, broken English shaped by survival. "I will have your child, if you keep me alive." Jason froze in the saddle. For a long breath, the only sounds were the rattle of the wind and the wheeze of her breath. He dismounted, boots crunching on the gravel. His eyes scanned the horizon, every instinct sharp as a blade. "Who's after you, girl?" Her eyes, dark as storm clouds, lifted to him. "My own, the Comanche. They want me dead." Jason's jaw tightened. He had buried a wife, fought in border skirmishes, and lost men to raids and gunfire. The Comanche were not strangers to him, but never had one dropped to her knees before him with such a plea. He crouched beside her, his shadow falling across her face. She trembled, clutching her side. A long, shallow cut bled through the leather of her dress. "You'll bleed out if you keep running like this," he muttered, tearing a strip from his bandana to press against the wound. His hands were steady, though inside something old and restless stirred. Her voice came again, softer now. "Please, old man, if you let me live, I give you child. I give you future." Jason stared at her, trying to read her meaning. He was too old for such talk. His wife, Miriam, had died 20 years ago without giving him children. He had long resigned himself to a life of cattle, whiskey, and silence. Yet here, in the dust, was a girl offering him the one thing life had denied him. A shout echoed from the ridge. Jason's head snapped up. 3 riders appeared against the red sky, their silhouettes crowned in the fire of the setting sun. Comanche, armed, coming fast. Jason's hand found his revolver. His horse snorted, pawing at the ground. The girl, Naya, though he did not yet know her name, gripped his coat sleeve with trembling fingers. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "Don't let them take me." Jason stood. The old fire, thought long dead, sparked in his chest. He shoved her toward his horse. "Get up," he growled. "If you want saving, you'll ride." She obeyed, scrambling into the saddle with surprising strength. Jason swung up behind her, his arm circling her waist to steady her. His colt gleamed in the fading light as the Comanche riders closed in. The chase began. The pounding of hooves thundered across the valley floor. Jason leaned low, his stubble brushing the girl's hair as he urged his horse faster. The wind stung his eyes, but his aim was steady. He fired once, twice, shots cracking like lightning. One rider tumbled from his horse, rolling lifeless in the dirt. The other 2 pressed harder. Jason gritted his teeth, every muscle remembering wars he thought he had left behind. The girl twisted in the saddle, shouting something in Comanche, words he could not understand. But filled with venom, one warrior drew closer, swinging a tomahawk. Jason waited until the man was near enough for him to see the whites of his eyes. Then he fired. The warrior toppled, but not before his axe cut a line across Jason's shoulder. Pain ripped through him hot and sharp, but he held the reins firm. The last rider pulled back, unwilling to die on that stretch of ground. With a curse, he wheeled his horse and vanished into the horizon. Jason slowed his horse only when the dust settled, both he and the girl gasping for breath. Blood seeped into his shirt, but his eyes never left the trail behind them. Finally, he spoke, voice low and harsh. "Girl, you just brought hell down on both of us." She turned, eyes shining with something fierce. "My name is Naya," she said, her voice stronger now, "and I would rather die with you than live with them." Jason stared at her, the weight of her words sinking like stone in his chest. He had no wife, no children, no future. But in that moment, with the girl clinging to him and the night closing in, the old rancher realized fate wasn't done with him yet. The lantern flickered weakly in Jason Holloway's hand as he pushed open the barn door. The horse was lathered, its sides heaving from the hard ride. Jason slid off first, then reached up to lift the girl down. She winced as her feet touched the ground, her wound pulling at her side. "Easy," Jason muttered, steadying her with one hand. His shoulder burned where the tomahawk had cut him, but he ignored it. Inside the barn, the smell of hay and horse sweat wrapped around them. Jason pulled an old wool blanket from a stall rail and threw it over her shoulders. "Sit," he ordered, pointing to a hay bale. She obeyed, clutching the blanket tight. Her eyes darted around the barn, wide and restless like a deer's. Jason struck a match, lit another lantern, and set it on a crate between them. Only then did he really see her face. Young, yes, but not soft. Hard lines of survival already etched around her mouth. Shadows of hunger under her eyes. She had been running longer than one night. Jason cleaned his knife with whiskey from a flask, then handed it to her. "Drink. It'll burn, but it'll do you good." She hesitated, then tipped it back. The liquor hit her throat and she coughed, eyes watering. But she didn't spit it out. Jason tore a strip from a feed sack, poured whiskey on it, and pressed it to her side. She hissed but didn't flinch. "You're tougher than you look," he said. "I had to be," she whispered. Her English was careful, shaped by time among whites. She shifted, the blanket sliding from her shoulders, and caught him staring, not at her body, though she was young and strong, but at the strange fire in her eyes. "You said your own people want you dead," Jason finally said. "Why?" Her lips tightened. "Because I would not obey. They promised me to a man. He is old, cruel. A chief. I ran. Now I am nothing to them." Jason leaned back on the crate, the lantern light carving deep shadows across his scarred face. "And what makes you think I can save you?" "You already did," she said simply. Her voice carried the weight of something he hadn't heard in years. Trust. He looked away, suddenly restless. Trust was a currency he had long ago stopped trading in. The next morning, Jason rode into town for supplies. He left Naya hidden in the loft, wrapped in the wool blanket, with a stern warning not to show herself. Dry Creek Junction was a thin line of buildings leaning into the wind. A saloon, a mercantile, a blacksmith, and a church that hadn't rung its bell in months. Jason's ranch was the last stronghold of the old settlers, and the townsfolk had long since learned to keep their distance. Still, eyes followed him as he tied his horse outside the mercantile. Jason Holloway wasn't a man folks forgot. His gray beard and scarred jaw carried stories that no one dared ask, but everyone whispered. Inside, he loaded flour, beans, and a coil of bandages onto the counter. Butch Tanner, the storekeeper, raised his brows. "Bandages? You got yourself in a scrape, Jason?" Jason's eyes met his, flat and cold. "Fence wire," he lied. Butch chuckled nervously. "Reckon so. Just seems like a lot for fence wire." Jason's silence made the man shift in his boots. He paid, loaded the supplies, and turned to leave, only to find Clint Rourke leaning against the hitching rail outside. Clint was everything Jason despised. Slick hair, tailored vest, and the smug smile of a man who owned more than he earned. His cattle empire spread like a shadow across the valley, swallowing smaller ranches whole. Jason's land was the last he hadn't claimed. "Well, if it ain't old Holloway," Clint drawled. "Still running that patch of dirt like it's worth something?" Jason tightened the strap on his saddlebag. "It's worth more than you'll ever know," Clint smirked. "Funny thing, heard tell someone saw you riding hard last night. Said you weren't alone. Some dark-haired little piece in your saddle." Jason's jaw hardened, but he gave no answer. Clint leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Now, if that's true, and if she's what I think she is, you just bought yourself more trouble than even you can handle." Jason met his gaze, ice blue eyes cutting like knives. "Best keep your ears out of my business, Rourke. Might find you don't like what you hear." For the first time, Clint's smirk faltered, but only for a breath. Then he tipped his hat mockingly and sauntered away. Jason climbed into the saddle, his thoughts heavy. He had lived long enough to know gossip traveled faster than bullets. It wouldn't be long before every set of eyes in Dry Creek turned toward his ranch. When he returned home, Naya was waiting by the barn door, blanket around her shoulders, eyes bright with worry. "You left me," she accused. "I came back, didn't I?" Jason grunted, unloading supplies. She followed him inside, stubborn as a shadow. "What did they say in town?" Jason dropped the sack of beans on the table and looked at her. "Doesn't matter. What matters is this: if you stay, you'll bring trouble. If you go, you'll bring death. I ain't decided which I prefer yet." Naya lifted her chin. "Then decide. But know this, I will not beg again. I will live or die by your hand." Jason studied her. He had seen men break under less weight than she carried in her eyes. She was not weak. She was not a child. And against every warning his bones screamed, he felt something stir. Not love. Not yet, but something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Hope. That night, Jason sat by the fire, the flames painting his weathered face in shades of orange. Naya sat across from him, silent, watching. He poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one toward her. She took it with both hands, sipping carefully. "Why me?" he asked suddenly, her brows furrowed. "What? You had 100 miles of land to run. Why'd you fall at my feet? Why offer me a child?" Naya stared into the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but sharp. "Because you are alone, like me and alone people. They understand." Jason said nothing. The crackle of the fire filled the silence, but her words dug deep, cutting past scars he thought were buried. Alone people. Yes, he understood that well enough. The next few days brought no peace. Jason worked the ranch like always, mending fences, hauling water, checking cattle, but every sound from the hills made him tense. Every rider on the horizon could be trouble. Naya kept to the barn loft when the sun was high, venturing out only at night. She moved quietly, careful not to leave signs, though Jason noticed her touch on everything. A rope coiled more neatly, a stall swept clean, a pot scrubbed brighter than he would have done, yet her presence weighed heavy. Jason hadn't had another soul under his roof in 20 years, not since Miriam. He caught himself listening for her breath at night, noticing the way her dark hair glinted firelight, the way her storm-colored eyes missed nothing. She wasn't a child, though she was young enough to be his daughter. She was a woman, sharp-edged by survival, carrying a fire she could barely contain, and that fire was about to draw eyes. On the 3rd day, Marshal Elias Braddock rode up the trail. Jason spotted him from the corral, the sun glinting off his badge. "Marshal," Jason greeted flatly, wiping sweat from his brow. Braddock swung down from his horse. He was a big man with tired eyes, a friend once, though the years had stretched that bond thin. "Zeke," Braddock caught himself, shaking his head. "Jason, word spread." Jason stiffened. "What word?" The marshal gave him a look. "That you've got an Indian girl hiding out here. Clint Rourke's boys swear they saw her." Jason's jaw tightened. "Clint Rourke can choke on his lies." Braddock sighed, dusting his hat. "Maybe, maybe not. But you know how this town is. A Comanche girl in your barn. Folks don't care if she's runaway or prisoner. They'll call it trouble either way." Jason leaned on the fence rail, his blue eyes hard. "Let 'em call it what they want. She stays." Braddock studied him, weighing the words. "You're setting yourself against more than just Clint. There's still bad blood from the raids years back. Some men lost wives, children. They won't stomach her living here." Jason turned his gaze toward the barn, where Naya's shadow flickered in the loft window. "I didn't ask for this, Marshal, but I won't hand her over." Braddock shook his head. "You always were a stubborn bastard." He climbed back into the saddle. "Watch your back, Jason. Clint's sniffing blood, and I can't hold back a mob forever." Jason said nothing as the marshal rode off, the dust cloud trailing like a warning. That evening, Naya came to him by the fire. She had been listening. Jason knew it by the set of her jaw, the tightness in her voice. They will come, she said. Your people. My people, both. Jason poked at the fire with an iron rod. Sparks leapt into the dark. So it seems. She stepped closer, firelight flickering across her face. Do you regret saving me? Jason looked up, meeting her eyes. He saw no fear there, only defiance. She wasn't begging now. She was testing him. No, he said finally. But I reckon I might pay for it. Naya sat opposite him, pulling the blanket tighter. Silence stretched, heavy but not empty. After a while, Jason asked, Tell me more. Why'd your own kin want you dead? A girl runs from a husband. Seems harsh punishment to hunt her down. Her gaze dropped to the flames. He was no husband. He was a chief, older than you. They gave me to him like a horse, a trade for peace. I refused him on our wedding night. I struck him when he touched me. Jason's brow furrowed. He had seen Comanche ways up close, but her words carried a raw edge. He swore I would be stoned before I ever left his lodge. But I ran. My cousin Tahoe tried to protect me. They beat him for it. Now, they will not forgive either of us. Jason's grip on the iron rod tightened until his knuckles whitened. He thought of Miriam, gentle Miriam, who had slipped from this world without giving him children. The empty years since. And now this girl, hunted for refusing to be broken. You're saying you'll be hunted till they've got your body in the dirt, Jason muttered. Naya's eyes lifted, fierce again. Unless I make a new life. A new tribe. With you, Jason's breath caught. The fire popped between them. I meant what I said, Naya whispered. I will give you a child. A son. He will carry your name. He will carry both bloods. They will not erase me. Jason leaned back, staring into the flames. He had lived 6 decades without children, hardened himself against the ache of it. But hearing the promise now, from this girl who had nothing left but defiance, shook him more than any bullet could. I'm an old man, he rasped. Too old for you, too old for sons. You don't know what you're asking. Naya leaned forward, her voice sharp. I know, I choose. Do you? Jason looked at her long and hard. She didn't waver. She wasn't bargaining anymore. She was declaring war on the fate handed to her, and for the first time in years, Jason felt something raw stir inside him. A choice, a chance. The choice came sooner than either expected. 2 nights later, Jason woke to the distant bark of dogs. He rose from his cot, pulling on his boots. Outside, the moon lit the yard in cold silver. Naya appeared from the barn, barefoot, her hair loose around her shoulders. They are coming, she whispered. Jason heard it then, the low thunder of hooves rolling over the hills. He cursed under his breath and grabbed his rifle. Stay behind me. But Naya shook her head. No. If they are my people, I must speak. If they are yours, then I fight. Jason stared at her, rifle heavy in his hands. She was no longer the desperate girl who had fallen at his feet. She was something else now, something fierce, and as the hoofbeats grew louder, Jason knew this night would mark the first real test of the vow they had spoken over firelight. She would not beg, and he would not hand her over. The night cracked open with the thunder of hooves. Jason stood in the yard, rifle leveled across the fence rail, every nerve sharpened to a killing edge. Beside him, Naya's breath was quick but steady, her hair dark as the shadows that stretched across the ranch. The riders appeared from the ridge, moonlight glinting off their guns. Not Comanche, not yet. These men wore broad hats and dusters, the kind you found in Dry Creek Saloon. Hired guns. At their head was Clint Rourke. Well, Clint called out, reining his horse at the edge of the yard. His teeth flashed in the pale light. I figured the rumors weren't just smoke. You really did bring an Indian girl into your house, Jason. Jason's voice was iron. Turn around, Rourke. This land don't welcome you. Clint laughed, and his men shifted in their saddles, hands close to their revolvers. See, that's where you're wrong. This land's just waiting for me to claim it. And that girl, she's the excuse I've been praying for. Folks in town are already whispering, saying you've lost your mind. Protecting a Comanche girl after all the blood spilled? That's treason, Jason. Jason kept his rifle steady, though his jaw tightened. What I do on my land is no concern of yours. Clint leaned forward, eyes glinting. Everything in this valley's my concern. I'll make it plain. You hand her over, and maybe I let you keep this patch of dirt a little longer. You refuse?" He shrugged, smiling cold. "Then maybe a mob comes riding with torches. Won't be me to blame. I'll just be the one who cleans up after." Jason's finger brushed the trigger. For a long breath, the only sound was the creak of saddles and the whisper of wind. Then Naya stepped forward. Her voice rang sharp and fearless. "Tell your men they will bleed before they touch me." Clint's smirk faltered for the briefest instant. He hadn't expected her to speak. He certainly hadn't expected her English to cut so clearly. Jason hissed under his breath, "Get back, girl." But Naya didn't move. Her eyes burned in the moonlight, fixed on Clint like a hawk's. "I'm not yours to trade," she said. "Not his. Not anyone's." Clint's smirk returned, but his eyes carried something darker now. "Pretty words. Shame they'll be the last you get to spit." His hand twitched toward his revolver. But before steel cleared leather, another cry split the night. A high-pitched, ululating call, echoing from the ridge above. Jason's heart sank. He knew that sound. Comanche. Shadows, detached from the rocks, riders sliding down the slope. There were only 3, but one was enough to change the air from tense to lethal. Jason recognized the paint streaking their faces. Scouts. They weren't here by accident. Clint cursed under his breath. "Hellfire! You brought your people here!" He snapped at Naya, but she shook her head fiercely. "Not mine! His!" Her gaze locked on the front rider, a young man with strong shoulders and hate burning in his eyes. Jason caught the resemblance in an instant. The set of his jaw, the sharpness of his cheekbones. "Your kin." Naya's lips tightened. "Tahoe, my cousin." The 3 Comanche riders pulled up, their horses stamping the ground. Tahoe barked something in their tongue, his words laced with fury. Naya answered, her voice sharp and defiant. Jason couldn't follow the language, but he understood enough by the way Tahoe's hand gripped his lance, by the fire in his eyes when he looked at Jason. "Don't take a translator to know he wants me dead," Jason muttered. Clint's laughter was brittle now. "Well, ain't this a fine mess? The savages want her, I want her, and you, old fool, you're stuck in the middle. What's it gonna be, Holloway?" Jason raised his rifle. "It's gonna be whoever takes one more step don't get up again." The yard went still. 6 riders, 2 sides, 1 old rancher standing against them all. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Clint sneered. "This ain't over. You can't hold off both white men and redskins forever." He tugged his reins and wheeled his horse. "Come on, boys. Let the old man stew in his own foolishness." One by one, his men followed, throwing hateful looks back as they rode off into the dark. That left only the Comanche. Tahoe sat motionless, his eyes locked on Naya. He barked another string of words, sharp as thrown knives. Naya answered, her voice low but steady. When she finished, Tahoe spat into the dirt, then pulled his horse around. The 3 riders disappeared into the hills as silently as they had come. Jason lowered his rifle, his chest heaving with slow, controlled breaths. He turned to Naya. "What did you tell him?" She looked at him, fire still burning in her eyes. "That if he wants me, he must kill you first, and he knows he cannot." Jason's jaw clenched. "You just put a target on my back, girl." Naya stepped closer, her hand brushing the scar at his jaw. "You were already marked. Now you are marked for me." Jason pulled back, unsettled by the weight of her words. "You don't know what you're asking me to carry." Her eyes didn't waver. "I do, and I will carry it with you. Later." When the ranch was quiet again, Jason sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees. The night felt too still, like the land itself was holding its breath. He thought of Clint's smug threat, of Braddock's warning, of Tahoe's hate-filled eyes, and of Naya's voice. Defiant, unyielding. He had lived his life in solitude, answering to no one. But the moment he'd lifted her into his saddle, he had chosen a path that led straight into fire. Jason Holloway was too old to dream of futures. But as the embers of his pipe glowed in the dark, he admitted one truth to himself. The girl had already become more than a burden. She was a promise, and promises had a way of demanding blood. The sun rose blood-red over Dry Creek, a bad omen that painted the valley in fire. Jason Holloway rode into town early, hat low, eyes sharp. He needed salt, nails, and one more coil of barbed wire, but mostly he needed to show his face. If he stayed holed up at the ranch, the rumors would only grow. The town was already buzzing. Groups of men lingered on porches, their voices low and sharp. Jason heard his name more than once, and the word savage hissed like a rattler's tail. At the saloon, Clint Rourke stood on the boardwalk like a preacher. His voice carried over the streets, smooth and poisonous. Men of Dry Creek, we all lost blood to Comanche raids, wives, sons, brothers. And now old Jason Holloway brings one of them into our town, feeds her, shelters her like she's one of us. What does that say to the dead we buried? What does that say to their memory? Murmurs of anger rippled through the crowd. Jason's hand brushed the butt of his Colt, but he kept walking. Clint spotted him and smiled all teeth. Speak of the devil! Here he is, defender of Comanche harlots. The crowd turned, eyes narrowing. Jason stopped in the middle of the street, dust swirling around his boots. He raised his head slowly, his ice-blue eyes cold as winter steel. You men know me, Jason growled. You know I've fought beside you, bled beside you. You think I'd betray you? You think I'd bring harm to this town? Clint cut in sharp. Then tell us plain, Jason, do you have her? Yes or no? Jason's jaw flexed. He could lie. He could buy himself a few days. But Naya's words echoed in his head. Alone people understand. He spat into the dirt. She's under my roof. And she stays there. That's all I got to say. A stunned silence followed. Then Clint laughed, loud and cruel. There you have it. He admits it. He'd rather bed down with savages than stand with his own. The crowd rumbled. Some men looked away, shame in their eyes. Others clenched their fists, spurred on by Clint's poison. Marshal Braddock pushed through, his voice booming. Enough! This ain't a lynching mob. You want justice? You come to me, not Rourke's mouth. Clint sneered. Justice? You call it justice to let him harbor the enemy? Braddock jabbed a finger at him. I call it justice to follow the law. And the law says she's under Jason's protection as long as she's on his land. Anyone wants to change that? His hand fell to the butt of his revolver. They go through me. For a moment, the tension hung heavy, like a fuse burning slow. Then the crowd broke apart, muttering, scattering back to their business. Clint stood glowering, his pride wounded but not dead. This ain't over, he hissed as Jason passed. Jason didn't answer. He mounted his horse and rode out, the stairs of the town burning holes in his back. Back at the ranch, Naya was waiting by the porch, barefoot, her dress still torn from that first night. You told them, she said, her voice unreadable. Jason dismounted, slinging the sack of nails over his shoulder. I told the truth. Ain't no use hiding from what's plain to see. Naya's eyes softened, just a little. Then you chose, Jason grunted. I chose. And now the whole damn valley's gonna come calling. That night, as the crickets sang and the cattle shifted restlessly in their pens, Jason sat on the porch, cleaning his rifle. Naya came and sat beside him, her knees drawn up under the blanket. They will not stop, she said quietly. Not Clint, not Tahoe. They will come again with more men and more guns. Jason slid a cartridge into the chamber, the sound sharp in the stillness. Then we'll be ready. Naya studied him, her storm-dark eyes glinting in the lantern light. Why? Jason paused. Why what? Why do you fight for me? You could give me to them. No one would think less of you. They would call you wise. Yet you fight. Jason set the rifle down across his knees. For a long time, he stared out at the horizon, the line of hills black against the stars. Because I buried a woman once, he said at last. His voice was low, rough. Buried her and the life we never had. And I swore I'd never open myself to that kind of pain again. But you came along, and you looked me in the eye, and you asked me plain to save you. And damn me, girl, I couldn't walk away. Naya reached out, her hand resting lightly on his weathered one. Then we are the same, she whispered. I buried myself the day I ran. I thought no one would see me again. But you did. Jason didn't move. He didn't pull away. And for the first time in years, the silence between him and another soul felt less like loneliness and more like belonging. The next dawn shattered that fragile peace. Jason was in the barn when the dogs barked, short, sharp, angry barks. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. At the edge of the yard, 5 Comanche riders waited, and at their head was Tahoe. Naya stepped out from the house before Jason could stop her. Her face was pale, but her spine was straight. Tahoe called out in their tongue, his voice carrying on the wind. Jason didn't need a translation. His eyes never left Naya. She answered, her voice strong, sharp. They went back and forth, fire in every word. Finally, Tahoe leaned forward on his horse, his hand gripping his lance. He barked one last word, spat like venom. What did he say? Jason asked. Naya's jaw trembled, though her eyes didn't waver. He said, "If I am not returned by the next moon, he will come with 20 men. And he will burn this ranch to the ground." Jason's grip on the rifle tightened. 20 men. The old rancher had faced long odds before, but this time, it wasn't just his blood on the line, it was hers and the promise she had laid at his feet. The ranch had never felt smaller. Jason walked its length in the dim light of dawn, boots crunching the dry earth, rifle slung across his shoulder. Every fence post, every barn wall, every sagging shutter looked less like a home and more like a battlefield waiting to happen. Naya followed him, carrying a bucket of water from the well. She set it down with a grunt, brushing hair from her eyes. "This place will not hold 20 men," she said. Jason grunted, inspecting the fence line. "Maybe not, but we don't need to hold forever. Just long enough to make them bleed." Her storm-dark eyes studied him. "You fought like this before?" Jason's jaw tightened. "Fought too many times. Each time I told myself it'd be the last. And yet," she said softly. "And yet here we are," Jason finished. By noon, he had the place bristling with makeshift defenses. Barrels stacked by the barn doors, fence posts sharpened into stakes, rifles cleaned and loaded. He even dug shallow trenches at the yard's edge. Crude, but enough to trip a charging horse. Naya worked beside him without complaint. She carried water, rolled barrels, even practiced with the old shotgun Jason handed her. Her aim was wild at first, the recoil knocking her back. But she steadied quickly, jaw tight, shoulders squared. "Again," Jason told her. She fired. This time, the blast punched clean through the plank target. Jason gave a small nod. "You'll do," he said. She smirked, just barely. "Better than you expected." Jason allowed the corner of his mouth to twitch. "Better than most men I've seen in town." That smirk faded as her gaze drifted toward the horizon. "They will come soon." "I feel it," Jason said nothing. He felt it too. In Dry Creek, Clint Rourke was already sharpening the knife. He held court at the saloon, his voice dripping venom. "Jason Holloway's gone soft. He's hiding that girl under his roof, defending her like she's one of ours. And now word is her people are coming. 20 Comanche warriors riding this way. Do you want that fight on his land? Or do you want it on yours?" When they're done with him, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Some men shifted uneasily, remembering burned homesteads and empty graves. Clint slammed his fist on the bar. "If Holloway won't give her up, then it's on us to drag her out. Better one girl dies than 20 more widows crying come Sunday." A few men nodded grimly. Fear did the rest. By sundown, Clint had 10 volunteers willing to ride with him, not against the Comanche, but against Jason. Marshal Braddock came that evening, his horse blowing hard as he rode up to Jason's porch. Jason was cleaning his colt on the steps, Naya sharpening a knife at his side. "Jason," Braddock said, his voice weary, "I've held off as long as I can, but Clint's got half the town twisted round his finger. They're coming for you, and when Tahoe shows up with his men, you'll have both sides breathing down your neck." Jason holstered the colt. "Then I'll give 'em a neck too thick to choke." Braddock rubbed his brow. "Damn it, Jason, you can't win this. You're one man—" Jason cut him off. "One man was all it took to build this place. One man'll be all it takes to defend it." Naya rose, knife gleaming in her hand. "Not one man, 2. Braddock stared at her, startled by the fire in her eyes. Then he looked back at Jason, his jaw tight. "You sure about this?" Jason's silence was answer enough. Braddock cursed under his breath. "I'll do what I can to keep the law from joining Clint's mob." But you'd better be ready, old friend. This valley's about to bleed." He rode off into the night, leaving only dust and silence in his wake. That night, Jason sat by the fire, staring into the flames. His body ached from work, his hands raw, but his mind burned hotter than the coals. Naya sat across from him, wrapped in the blanket. She studied him quietly for a long while before speaking. "You do not fear death," she said. Jason's eyes flicked up. "I've met death too many times to fear it. Only thing I fear is what comes before." "And what is that?" "Phelan," Jason muttered. "Phelan, the ones who counted on me. Miriam, the boys who rode with me. Now," he trailed off. "Now me," Naya finished softly. Jason said nothing, but the silence between them was answer enough. She leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "If I die as myself. Not as a slave, not as a wife to a man I do not want. If I die here, I die free. And if I live—" She paused, eyes locking on his. "Then I will give you the child I promised. And he will carry both our blood." Jason's throat worked, but no words came. For the first time since Miriam's death, the thought of a son, a legacy, struck him not as a wound, but as a possibility. "Sleep," he said finally, his voice rough. "Tomorrow'll be long." But he didn't sleep. Neither of them did. The next dawn broke sharp and clear. Jason was already saddled when the first riders appeared on the ridge. Clint Rourke, 10 men behind him. Their rifles glinted in the sun, and behind them, further off, another dust cloud rose. Comanche, Tahoe's war party. Jason spat into the dirt. "Well, go." Seems they both came knocking. Naya stepped beside him, the shotgun cradled in her arms. Her voice was steady. "Then let us answer." Jason's old heart thudded in his chest, not from fear, but from the fire of a man who had finally chosen his side. He was too old to dream, but not too old to fight. The two dust clouds grew until they filled the horizon. Jason Holloway stood in the yard, rifle balanced in his hands, Naya at his side with the shotgun. Behind them, the ranch sat still and silent, its fences bristling with sharpened stakes, barrels stacked high like crude battlements. Clint Rourke reined in first. His 10 hired men fanned out in a half circle, their rifles gleaming. "Well, Jason," Clint called, voice mocking, "looks like the Comanche got the same invitation I did. You really know how to host a party." Jason's voice carried steady as stone. "You brought this, Rourke. You and your poisoned tongue," Clint smirked. "And you brought her. Give her up and maybe you walk away." Jason's answer was simple. He raised his rifle. The smirk faltered, but before Clint could speak again, a second cry rang out. The Comanche war whoop. Tahoe and 15 warriors crested the ridge, their ponies kicking up dust. Their faces streaked with war paint. They reined in opposite Clint's men, a deadly triangle, with Jason's ranch at its heart. For a moment, no one moved. Then Clint barked, "There she is!" He jabbed a finger at Naya. "The runaway savage! Holloway's whore!" Naya's eyes blazed. She stepped forward, voice sharp as steel. "I'm no man's whore. I'm Comanche, and I choose my path." The declaration rippled like thunder across the field. Tahoe snarled something in their tongue, raising his lance. His men echoed with a howl. Clint's pistol cleared leather. "Take her!" Gunfire exploded. Jason's first shot dropped the man nearest Clint. He racked the lever and fired again, sending another rider crashing into the dirt. Naya's shotgun boomed beside him, the blast ripping through a hired gun who had dared rush the fence. The yard filled with chaos. Bullets smacked against the barn walls, splinters flying. Horses screamed, men shouted. The acrid smoke of black powder thickened the air. Jason moved like a man 20 years younger, his body remembering wars he'd sworn to forget. He dropped 1, 2, 3 men, each shot deliberate, calm, deadly. Naya reloaded the shotgun with trembling but steady hands, her jaw clenched. She fired, reloaded, fired again. Blood sprayed the fence posts, bodies littered the dirt. But Tahoe's warriors pressed closer, weaving their ponies, loosing arrows that whistled through the air. One arrow grazed Jason's arm, another thudded into the barn door inches from Naya's head. "Inside!" Jason barked, pulling her toward the barn. They dove through the doors, slamming the heavy planks shut behind them. Bullets thudded into the wood, arrows rattled like hail. Jason shoved a barrel against the door, breathing hard. This won't hold him long. Naya's eyes burned. Then we make it costly. Outside, Clint screamed orders, spitting curses. Push him out! Burn the place if you have to. Tahoe's war cry split the night. Take her! She is ours! But Jason's rifle cracked again and again from the barn's narrow window slits. Each shot found a target, and each target fell. He had only so many cartridges, but his aim wasted none. Naya crouched at his side, firing the shotgun at any rider bold enough to come close. The recoil battered her shoulder, but she did not falter. Through the smoke, Jason saw Clint, red-faced and snarling, urging his men forward. He also saw Tahoe. His cousin's eyes locked on Naya with murderous fire. Two enemies, one goal. Jason spat into the dirt. Damn vultures will kill each other over her if I let them. Naya's hand touched his arm, then let them. We only need to outlast. Jason looked at her, really looked. Her face was streaked with soot, her hair tangled, but her eyes glowed fierce and unbroken. She wasn't a frightened girl anymore. She was a warrior in her own right, and for the first time, Jason allowed himself to believe she might truly give him the future she'd promised. The standoff stretched on. Smoke thickened, men fell, but still Clint's guns and Tahoe's warriors circled like wolves. Then fate struck. A lantern inside the barn toppled, spilling fire across the straw. Flames leapt hungrily, smoke billowing. Jason cursed, hauling the lantern clear, but the straw caught fast. The barn was turning into a trap. Clint's laughter carried through the chaos. Smoke 'em out, boys. Let the fire do the work. Jason's mind raced. Stay and burn. Run and be cut down. Naya grabbed his arm. The well. He blinked. What? She pointed, through the rear stall where a trough led to the well. The ditch was narrow, hidden by brush, but it led away from the ranch's heart. Jason hesitated. Abandoning the barn meant abandoning cover, but the flames were already clawing up the rafters. Go! He barked. They sprinted through the smoke, coughing, ducking low. Jason kicked the stall door open, dragging Naya behind him. They dove into the ditch, crawling on hands and knees through the brush. Bullets whined overhead, arrows thudded into the dirt, but the smoke cloaked their escape. When they burst into the open air at the well's edge, Jason hauled Naya up, both of them gasping. The barn roared behind them, a pillar of fire lighting the night. Jason raised his rifle, eyes blazing through the smoke. They want us? They'll have to come into the fire to get us. Naya stood beside him, shotgun ready, her voice fierce as a war cry. Let them come. The flames painted the yard hell red. Shadows danced, men shouted, the chaos of battle rising to fever pitch. Clint's men hesitated at the blaze, fear creeping in. Tahoe's warriors circled, their cries sharp but wary, and in the heart of it all stood Jason and Naya, two souls alone. Backs against the fire, guns steady, daring the world to take them. The siege had begun, and it would not end without blood. The barn burned like a pyre, flames leaping high enough to paint the valley blood red. Smoke rolled thick, stinging eyes and choking lungs, but Jason Holloway stood tall in the glow. Rifle in his hands, jaw set, his silhouette cut against the inferno like an iron statue. Naya was beside him, the shotgun clutched firm, her dark hair wild in the firelight. Her storm-colored eyes burned with the same fury as the blaze behind them. Clint Rourke's men faltered at the sight. Smoke and fear twisted their ranks, their leader screaming to hold steady. On the opposite ridge, Tahoe's warriors howled, circling like wolves, lances gleaming. Caught between two storms, Jason's voice rang out over the chaos. You want her, he roared. Come through me! The words cracked like a whip, and for a moment the whole valley froze. Then the storm broke. Clint's hired guns rushed first, spurred on by their master's rage. Jason fired 1, 2, 3 shots, each finding its mark. Men tumbled into the dust, horses screamed, rifles cracked in reply. Naya fired the shotgun, the blast throwing one rider backward in a spray of blood, but it was chaos, too many guns, too many hooves. Jason grabbed Naya's arm, pulling her back toward the water trough. Keep low, he barked. Bullets chewed the dirt around them, splinters flying from the fence posts. Jason's shoulder burned where a shot grazed him, but he gritted his teeth and fired back, each shot measured, deliberate. Through the smoke, Clint bellowed like a mad dog. "Take her alive! Holloway dies!" Jason's bullet cut the hat clean off his head, and Clint dove behind a barrel with a curse. Then came Tahoe. The young Comanche chief spurred his pony hard, his warriors surging behind him. Arrows darkened the air, thudding into the yard. Jason dropped another man with his rifle, but Tahoe was already charging. Lance lowered. Naya screamed his name. Jason spun, leveled the rifle. Click, empty. Tahoe bore down, his eyes blazing with hate. At the last instant, Naya stepped in front, shotgun raised. The blast ripped through the night, the force slamming Tahoe's pony sideways. The horse screamed and toppled, throwing its rider hard into the dirt. Tahoe rolled, sprang to his feet, knife in hand. His eyes locked on Naya, fury burning hotter than the flames. "You're mine!" He spat in his tongue. Jason charged, drawing his Colt, but before he could fire, Naya snatched up the fallen lance. With a cry that shook the yard, she drove it forward. The blade struck true. Tahoe staggered, eyes wide, the firelight dancing in them. He dropped his knife, clutching at the shaft. Blood bubbled on his lips. "You were mine," he choked. Then he crumpled into the dust, lifeless. Naya stood over him, chest heaving, her hands trembling on the lance. Jason pulled her back, his Colt raised as the battle still raged around them. But when the Comanche saw their young leader fall, a cry went up, half grief, half fury. Some charged in blind rage, others wheeled their ponies and fled into the night. The yard became a slaughter. Clint saw the shift and seized his chance. He rose from cover, screaming at his men. "Forget the savages. Take Holloway!" But his men were already breaking. Too many had fallen to Jason's aim, too many spooked by fire and blood. One by one, they dropped their rifles and fled, scattering into the smoke. Clint cursed them, firing wildly at Jason. Bullets whined past, one grazing Jason's cheek. Jason answered with his Colt, the muzzle flashing in the dark. The first shot clipped Clint's arm. The second knocked him back against the barrel. Jason stepped forward, steady as death, Colt raised. "It ends here, Rourke." Clint sneered through the blood on his teeth. "You think you've won? You'll die out here with that girl, and the land'll be mine all the same." Jason's eyes were cold steel. "Maybe, but not today." The Colt roared. Clint's body jerked, then crumpled into the dirt. His final smirk froze on his face, lifeless. The yard fell silent, save for the crackle of fire and the labored breath of the living. Jason lowered the Colt slowly, his chest heaving. Blood dripped from his shoulder, his cheek, his side. He felt every one of his 62 years, but he was still standing. Naya dropped the lance, her hands shaking. She looked down at Tahoe's body, her cousin, her enemy, her blood. For a moment, her face twisted with grief, but then she turned to Jason. "I chose," she whispered fiercely. "I chose you, even if the world burns for it." Jason stared at her, the firelight flickering in her storm-dark eyes. He thought of Miriam, of empty years, of the silence that had been his only companion. And now this girl, fierce and unbroken, standing at his side with blood on her hands for him. "You saved me," she said. "Now I save you." Jason felt something stir in his chest, something he had buried long ago. Not just survival, not just defiance, hope. He holstered his Colt and pulled her close, her trembling body pressed against his weathered frame. The barn burned behind them. The night reeked of blood and smoke. But for the first time in years, Jason Holloway felt alive. The siege was over. Clint Rourke was dead, his men scattered. Tahoe's warriors, leaderless, melted into the hills. The valley lay quiet once more. Jason stood in the yard, smoke curling around him, his arm around Naya's shoulders. The ranch was scarred, blackened, blooded, but it still stood, and so did they. Dawn came gray and heavy, the kind of light that made every scar on the land show clear. The barn was a black skeleton, its rafters still smoking. Blood stained the yard, dark patches in the dust where men had fallen. The cattle lowed nervously, still spooked from the night's fury. Jason Holloway leaned on the porch rail, his shoulder bound in cloth, his cheek stitched by his own rough hand. Every bone in his body ached, but he was alive. Alive and not alone. Nasha knelt by the well, washing the blood from her hands. The water turned red, then clear again. She moved slowly, her body sore, but her back was straight. Her storm-dark eyes held no shame as she looked at the crimson swirling down the dirt. Jason watched her a long moment. "You did what you had to." She turned her face toward him. "He was my blood, but he would have killed me. Sometimes family is the first enemy," Jason grunted, the words cutting close to home. "You learned that faster than most." Naya rose, drying her hands on her dress. She crossed the yard to stand beside him, the sunrise painting her face in copper and gold. "What now?" she asked. Jason let out a long breath. "Now? Now we rebuild." By mid-morning, Marshal Braddock rode up the trail with 2 deputies. He stopped dead at the sight. Clint Rourke's body still sprawled in the dirt, the barn's smoldering Comanche corpses scattered like broken dolls. "Sweet Lord," Braddock muttered, swinging down from his horse. "You two held this?" Jason straightened. "We did." Braddock walked the yard, boots crunching on ash, eyes heavy with what he saw. Finally, he turned back. "Clint's dead. His men scattered. Town'll hear soon enough. There'll be questions, reckonings." Jason spat into the dust. "Let him ask." Braddock studied him. Then he looked at Naya, her chin lifted, her gaze unflinching. "And her? What's her place in all this?" Jason's voice was steady. "She's under my roof, under my name." Braddock's brows rose. "That's so." Jason's eyes didn't waver. "That's so." For a moment, the marshal said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "Reckon that'll rattle cages? But it's your land, Jason. And I seen with my own eyes what she did. That girl ain't weak." Naya's lips curved, just barely. "I am not a girl," Braddock gave a rough chuckle. "No, ma'am." "I suppose you're not." He tipped his hat, mounting up again. "I'll tell the town it was Rourke who stirred this. Man dug his own grave. Maybe they'll let the rest lie." Jason's voice was flat. "And if they don't?" Braddock looked back, his eyes tired but honest. "Then you'll stand like you always have, alone, but maybe not so alone anymore." He rode off, leaving dust in his wake. That night, the ranch was quiet again. Jason sat by the fire inside the cabin, his Colt on the table, his shoulders stiff under the bandages. Naya sat across from him, sewing a tear in her dress by lantern light. After a long silence, she spoke. "You said once you feared failing those who counted on you." Jason's eyes lifted. "You did not fail me," she said. Her voice was soft, but there was iron in it. "You gave me life, and I gave you blood for it." Jason leaned back, staring into the fire. "You gave me more than that," she tilted her head. "What?" Hope flickered in his weary eyes. "A reason." Her hand stilled on the needle. The firelight warmed her face, softening the hardness there. Slowly, she set the cloth aside and came to sit beside him. "You are not alone anymore," she whispered. Jason turned to her, his scarred face close to hers, his breath heavy with the weight of years. He reached out, his calloused hand brushing her hair back. For a moment he saw Miriam's gentle smile in memory, but this was no ghost. This was flesh, fierce and real. Naya laid her hand over his. "I will give you the child I promised, and he will carry both our blood. He will live when all others said we should not." Jason's throat tightened. He pulled her close, his arms strong around her shoulders. For the first time in 2 decades, Jason Holloway let himself believe in tomorrow. In Dry Creek, tongues wagged, but the story spread faster than fear. Clint Rourke had overreached, and Jason Holloway had cut him down. The Comanche had lost their young leader, and the survivors melted back into the plains. Some called Jason a fool. Others called him a madman, but none dared ride against him again, because when men spoke his name now, they added hers too. Jason Holloway and Naya, 2 souls bound by blood, fire, and defiance. That night, as the stars wheeled overhead, Jason lay awake listening to the quiet. Naya's breath was steady beside him. The world would not forget them. The valley would not forgive easily. But for the first time in years, Jason didn't care, because he was no longer a man waiting to die. He was a man living again. And the future, uncertain, dangerous, fragile, was theirs, together.